We're also pleased today to have with us the President of the National Boer War Memorial Association, Colonel John Haynes, OAM. Colonel Haynes will speak to us about the Boer War. So ladies and gentlemen, will you please welcome Colonel Haynes.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I want to first thank John for introducing the Boer War theme into the activities for next year. It's a great help to the many volunteers and descendants who are involved in the project so far. John has asked me to mention a few snippets of the Boer War, the aftermath, and then the situation with the memorial as it stands today. Now, statistics. Nearly 23,000 young people from Australia went to South Africa to serve in that war. And nearly 1,000 of them died there. And they're not commemorated in Anzac Day, Canberra. You will hear later of VCs. There are 6 VCs awarded and 161 other bravery awards. So it wasn't just a small stoush. We sent 43,000 horses, mostly whalers from New South Wales, and none came back. But one animal did come back. And that must be a story for another day, except that it must include the fact the animal was a prisoner of war at one stage. The next thing of note was that the people coming back from England, troopers coming back from England, were invited to fight. They were from a unit, Parramatta, you'll hear a bit later about. I joined that unit in 1948 as a trooper, so I've got a connection there. And incidentally, John, you forgot to mention that my uncle fought in the Boer War, Malcolm Stewart Haynes. So the troopers were enlisted very quickly by the British. To their horror, they found that they only had 26 bits of kit. So they equipped 26 of the near 100 that had volunteered with a horse and all the necessary gear. And off they went. They were sent to a British division to fight. And they established the Australian tradition very quickly because they knew what a horse looked like and they understood a bit of good horse flesh. And they liked the look of the general's horse. So they thought they'd do a fine coffin on it. But that's got to be a story for another day, quite a long story, but we mustn't forget the role that the walnut tree played in that fine cotton switch, which actually happened. So let's turn to the war itself. The first thing of note for Australia was that we had a rather bad siege called Mafeking, many of you will know about. The siege was broken, and the bells throughout England rang out. But it's little known fact that the first people to enter Mafeking was an Australian patrol. Troopers led by a captain. So that was the first left feather in our cap. Now there was another siege that was fairly famous and far more dangerous. The British established a stores depot at a place called Ellen's River. It was a good spot, there was a bit of water there, and it was nice and clear, no trees much. It was like an upturned saucer. The bad news was it was surrounded by hills. So the British sent about 200 troops there, mostly Australian troopers, and masses of stores, over 2,000 animals, horses and cattle, and it was quite an attractive little shop for the Boers. And they surrounded it. 2,200 Boers surrounded this bit of dirt and proceeded to fire mass rifle fire and artillery upon it. Now the troopers thought they'd have a little bit of bloods, didn't they? But it didn't turn out that way. They suddenly found they had to do a lot of digging. And to their horror, after the first couple of inches, they found that the under strata was slate. Now slate's bad enough if it's vertical, horizontal, but this was vertical slate. Can you imagine digging foxholes in that with only bayonets? Well, of course, this story has got to wait for another day too. It's worth a book or two itself. The story of the attempts by several generals to relieve them, an attempted surrender, what the Australian troopers did to the Boers at night. So we'll move on. That was Ellen's River, and a big feather in the cap for Australia. So next, we come to the unpleasant part of the war, well, more unpleasant. The early part of the war, there were fixed set-piece attacks, formations advancing under artillery fire to an objective, and then charging with bayonets. And the horror of that is reflected in letters from my uncle. The latter part of the war, of course, was more a guerrilla war. And Moran has already been mentioned. The two were shot, and Whitten, the third chap, went into prison in England. The Australian government heard about that, were furious that these people should have been subject to British law without reference to Australia. And as a result, the British released Whitten. They didn't pardon him, they released him. Too late for Hancock and Moran. But the good news was, from that day forward, the Australian government never allowed our servicemen to be subject to foreign law. And that stands today. The other bit of good news out of the Boer War was, what about those light horse units fighting in Gallipoli and in the Western Front? How many veterans of the Boer War would they have in their numbers? Quite a few. What a wonderful thing for a CO to have war veterans as part of his force, going offshore at Gallipoli. So that brings me through to the National War Memorial to be built in Anzac Parade, Canberra. The Army Corps Association initiated this project in 2005. Why the Army Corps Association? Well, there were 23,000 young people over there, and 90+% of them were horsemen, and they're all called troopers. And we call troopers, our private soldiers of today, in the Army Corps, of course, are called troopers. So that's the connection. We were allotted a site in Anzac Parade, Canberra. It has been dedicated and signposted. And after 5 years of hard work and lobbying, all sorts of things, we now have an approved design. It was approved last Thursday at 8:30 in the morning. We can't talk too much about it yet because the Minister hasn't written to me to tell me it's happened, but it did happen. And it is the design that we wanted. It is a full regimental section of mounted troopers in patrol mode. And you'll be hearing more about that later. So where are we at with the construction? Well, we need 3 or 4 million bucks. So we have a challenge. We're hoping that the chairman of the Anzac Centenary Board, who was the last CDF, Air Chief Marshal Houston, will recommend to government that they construct the memorial. In any event, we must have our sculptor commissioned to do the first horse and rider by the end of next year, because there are 4 horses with riders, all 1.5 size, realistic, and he takes 6 months to do each one. So that's going to gobble up 2 years, which will bring us through to the end of December 2014, and of course it must be up. It would be a disgrace if it's not up before the centenary of Anzac Parade on the 25th of April 2015. But don't wait for the government. If there's anyone here who would like to have their facial features on one of those horsemen, it'll cost you $1 million. You only want 4. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.